Hello and welcome back. Today we want to talk about SSD caching, and really we want to focus on the brand new series of drives from Seagate, the Seagate Ironwolf 110 NAS optimized SSD. Now, I've already spoke with Seagate a bunch of times and I've already done a bunch of content on these, and we've been told over and over again that these are optimal for NAS environments. You can use them as raw RAID storage, but predominantly you guys are probably going to be using these for caching and tiered storage. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 tests on this Synology behind me. This is the DS2419 Plus. It's got a quad-core Atom-based CPU, and it's got, I believe, about 4 to 8 gig of memory pre-installed. We'll find out more when we log into DSM. What we're going to do with the one hard drive we've installed inside it is we're going to do a bunch of read, write, copy, paste operations inside. We're just going to get the device doing loads of stuff inside with that single hard drive connected via SATA. We want to see how long it takes to finish those operations, as well as how the system reacts to it. Then we're going to do 2 more tests. We're going to do a cache environment with 2 SSDs. In one case, we're going to utilize these new Seagate drives. We're going to put these in a read-write cache environment to support that hard drive, and then do all of the same read-write internal operations that we did before. Now, my hope is, as in previous tests have shown, that it will do them all a lot quicker thanks to SSD caching. But the real purpose of this test is, after that, doing exactly the same test with these Samsung EVOs. We want to know if there is any difference between using the new Seagate drives or Samsung EVO, which are a little cheaper in price, although not as proficient and fully featured with all the data recovery and all that lark as these Seagate drives. With the price difference between them, and so many of you looking at the price per terabyte and price per gigabyte, is it worth you, if you're going to go down the road of cache, going for the Seagate drives or going for the Samsung drives? So let's make our way to DSM 6.2 and get these tests started. Right, so here we are on the desktop of our DS2419 Plus with DSM 6.2, and what we're going to do is do our first test using 100 gig of files. We're going to make 3 separate copies of these files all onto the same hard drive, and all of them at the same time. So if we take a little look, we can have a look at the storage manager to show you the media that we've got inside this device, because for now we're going to use a single hard drive. The single hard drive inside here, if we carry on and have a look further down the bottom, you can see it's a 4 TB drive. I believe it's a 4 TB WD red hard drive, and all of the media and all the files we're going to be utilizing are there. Also, as you can see, no SSD cache has been enabled. Also, throughout this video, let's leave the resource monitor up so we can take a good look at how the system deals with the mass copying and pasting of files that we're going to do in this video. Also, the test files that we're going to be utilizing. Sorry, let's do that properly here. Going to leave the keyboard for a second. We right click, we look at the properties. We'll be able to see that we're dealing with 100 gigabytes of files, and that is almost 5,000 files we're dealing with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the clock in a second, and then I'm going to make 3 separate copies of these files in one location to show you why a hard drive on its own isn't enough. So for the first stage of the test, let's go. I'm going to right click, I'm going to copy, I'm going to select just some random folders here. We're going to paste into music, paste overwrite, go back to the share directory, going to hide that there. Going to be a slight delay because there's going to be a few more pop-ups as we go. Right click, it'd be easier if we copy to. We did music, next we'll do photo. Copy that into that directory. Get ready to click hide again. And for one final time, we'll copy those files to the video directory. Click OK, and we'll let that happen straight away. As you can see, disk utilization has gone absolutely crazy, which is no surprise given we are doing so much stuff to that single hard drive. Up here we've got the copying and the behavior of those files. If we can go a little bit deeper, if we go into the disk, we can see that utilization going absolutely bananas. And again, what we'll do, and we'll fast forward time a little bit and just show how long it's going to take for this transfer to take place. And once again, this is on just a single hard drive with no SSD cache. So let's fast forward a bit. And there you have it, the files have completed their operation. There's some other stuff going on there in the background, but we can delay that for another time. But ultimately, the file testing is now drawing to a close, and it has taken, let's take another quick look at that clock. It's taken about 1 hour and 35 minutes to simultaneously copy 100 gig of files to 3 separate locations, all within the same disk. I think we can safely say this is going to take about 1 hour 40 minutes, maybe a little bit under. It's about to finish. And in the meantime, we're going to get ready for the next barrage of testing. There we go, 1 hour 36 minutes. So, what have we got left to do? Well, I can tell you right now, the first thing we're going to do is install 2 Samsung 860 SSDs. And then from there, we're going to create an area of SSD cache storage, and then begin the same test, but this time with the Samsung SSDs, and then see how that compares later with the Seagate SSDs. So I've installed one drive, and again we're doing hot swap here, so I don't need to power down the device. And we're going to install a second SSD, and these should appear on the storage manager shortly. So if we go into the storage manager, we'll leave that there. We'll stop the clock and reset the clock there for the next test. In the storage manager, we should now be able to see the 2 SSDs that I've just installed. There we are, 2 Samsung SSD 860 EVOs. So from here, we're going to go down to SSD cache. We're going to click create. We're going to do read-write cache, which is definitely better because it leverages the performance across 2 disks in a RAID environment. We're going to select these 2 disks. Going to click next. Select RAID 1, which is optimal for read-write cache with 2 disks. Click apply, and we're going to let this device create our area of SSD cache that's going to support that single hard drive inside the device. While it does that, I do think it's worth reminding you once again that you will get far better performance in SSD cache if you're using the cache to support several drives in a RAID environment. The only reason I'm using a single drive, a single hard drive to support these tests is just to show you on a very basic level, 1, the benefits of SSD cache, but 2, and more importantly, to see how the Samsung 860 EVO drives that we're using for this test compare against the Ironwolf 110 NAS SSDs. So this seems to be taking an extra little period longer. So what I'm going to do is fast forward the video to the beginning of the next stage of tests. I'm also going to delete the data that we created on these separate drives. So we're going to remove all that data there. Going to delete. We want to permanently delete as well. Go into photo. Do the same again. Delete all of those files. And finally, in the video section, I'm going to delete all of those too. Don't be surprised if you see specs jumping around a little bit while I'm doing all of this. While that does that, we're going to hide that pop-up there. We're going to check on the SSD cache. It's not quite done yet. We're just going to let that carry on, and it will alert me once it's done. In the meantime, we've still got the deletion taking place, and I will fast forward this to the next stage of the testing. Right, so we've got our SSD cache enabled. We've got a previous data already deleted and removed from the device entirely. So without further ado, let's see what the difference is with those 840 EVOs in read-write cache on this device supporting that single drive. So we're going to repeat everything we did before, and you're going to be able to see the SSD cache kind of working here in the background. I'll try and keep that on screen as much as I can and not try to hide it too much with a stopwatch. But without further ado, let's go in. We're going to start the clock, and then I'll start moving these test files over to their relevant sections. So 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so we're going to move your files here. And again, for those that watched the previous part, I'm going to copy that to the music folder first. Click that, same again, but this time to the next folder along. This will go in the photo folder. And finally, we'll move that and copy it into the last one, which is our video folder. So this should all be running there in the background. We'll hide those. They're going to be up there. I'll open those up in a second. And in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll move that there. You'll be able to see a lot of the performance there on this other performance monitor. And of course, we want to see the timer on screen as much as possible. Now, what's changed between this and the previous test we were doing is the cache. Obviously, we've added storage, but that's not enough. What's happening here is because we're transferring the same 100 gigabytes of data to 3 different locations on the same disk that we're reading it from, the SSD cache is going to help us along, and it's going to identify that sometimes some of the files that we're using are going to be the same files. It will see frequently accessed data and it will act accordingly to utilize those, help us along with those files. It will create shadow or copy files on the section of cache, and straight away it's identified one there, and you'll see those spikes throughout the read-write speed of this test. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step away and then fast forward this video to the completion of this. I've almost every confidence that this will do this faster than that single hard drive thanks to the SSD cache. But remember, we've already done cache videos before on this channel. What we're trying to do today is figure out if there's any difference between these drives, the Samsung 860s, and those new Seagate Ironwolf 110 SSDs for NAS. So I'm going to fast forward and see you at the end of this transfer. And as it closes in, we've almost done with all 3 transfers onto that drive, but immediately look at that time difference. The previous test there took around 96 minutes and this has taken just over an hour, 62, almost 63 minutes for that copy across those 3. And of course that was largely assisted by that SSD cache. Once again, we knew that was going to happen, and we've done SSD caches before, but just take a moment there to think about the benefits of SSD caching even to a single hard drive, and that is something that only gets better once you introduce RAID. However, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dismantle this SSD cache, and I'm now going to build an area of SSD cache using those brand new Seagate Ironwolf SSDs. So let's remove this cache. Understand, it will completely wipe those drives, and while it does that, I'm also going to delete all the data we've created so we can start creating the SSD cache for these Seagate drives. So let's go through that. Let's delete. And rather than you guys having to sit through this and watch me, I'm going to prepare the last stage of the testing off camera, and I'm going to skip to it now. Right, so the third part of our test, let's get it underway. Straight away, we're going to SSD cache. We're going to create that SSD cache once again, but this time using the Seagate SSD drives. They're down here, and you may notice immediately that these are much bigger drives. These are 1.75 terabyte drives, or I believe they're 1.92 on the official packaging, but you've got to take into account the megs and the gigs and all that stuff. But what we're going to do is select both of these, but because this system has only got 4 gig of memory, it's probably going to drastically reduce the amount of SSD we're allowed to use. As we can see here, the amount of memory that corresponds to that, we can't make it any higher than that, so it's worth bear that in mind. But it won't matter too much in the grand scheme of things. It's just something I thought I'd highlight during the setup of this. It won't change the performance like for like against these two. What we're looking at is the construction, the build, and the NAND quality that we're using in the respective SSDs. And as mentioned earlier on, we had a good, what was it, 1 minute 2, 1 minute 4 that it took to do those other transfers or the copies of 100 gig 3 times on the same hard disk. And we're going to do exactly the same thing again, but with these drives here. We're going to wait until this is ready. It'll let us know when it's mounting. And of course, we're going to be using the same files once again on here to make these copies, these duplicates, onto 3 different locations on the same hard drive. So I'm going to give this a few seconds, and if it doesn't finish creating its cache, I'm just going to skip forward and get this test underway. Right, so our SSD cache has been created. I think it's time that we get things started. Right, let's go. So click File Station here, and again, same stuff we've been doing time and time again. I've already deleted it from all the other directories. In fact, I almost deleted all the files in error, but luckily I didn't do that. So we'll go back to here, and without further ado, scroll down and select our folders and files that we're going to copy. Once again, 100 gig of files, and without further ado, let's get the clock started and start copying those files to different directories. So copy to, and again, first one goes into music as before, then another one. We copy that bad boy, move that over there into the photos directory, and finally, last one, we copy to the video directory. Click video, go there, and once again, all of this is happening on a single hard drive. So this is all of these files, and we're seeing the benefits of using that SSD cache. Get rid of that, leave that there, get the clock up, not that one. You know, silly ones there, clicking things all over the shop. And now we can keep an eye on the clock and see just how quickly this does this. Will it be the same as the Samsung 860s? Will it be better? Will it be worse? It'll obviously be better than the hard drive on its own. Of that much I'm certain. But it will be interesting to see if this is any better or worse than that Samsung drive we used earlier. So this is the Ironwolf Ironwolf SSD. It's their NAS-based series of drives, the Ironwolf 110, and we're comparing that against the Samsung 860 EVOs. Currently, the more budget, cost-effective SSD that people are using. That I think till now, there's been an absence of NAS-based SSD, and I think we're going to see a lot of change in SSDs in the coming months, and definitely before the end of the year. I won't be surprised if we see a WD Red SSD sometime in the near future, and no doubt Toshiba will get on board with this. Maybe even WD will use SanDisk drives, who's to say. But I'm going to fast forward towards the end here so we can see just how long this takes. And as the count draws to the close, we can see that we're coming up on around 55 minutes when our 3 batches of 100 gig files are completing. So straight away we are seeing quite a noticeable difference there of around 5 minutes between the completion of the EVO 860s and the new Samsung Ironwolf SSD. So let's move over to compare all 3 speeds that we achieved on the 3 different platforms and see how they compared overall. So if we look back at the results of all 3 tests, some very clear things became apparent to us. First and foremost, unsurprisingly, the single disk without any SSD cache, of course, was the slowest of the 3. It took around 1 hour, 36 minutes, or 96 minutes if you want to be precise, from the start of the clock and the beginning of the copy-paste procedure all the way through to the completion of all 3 copies of the same 100 gig of data to 3 separate locations. Now, during that time, the things that we learned from that, there was around 40% CPU utilization on average and 20% memory utilization. Obviously, the entire volume was used during that time period, and across that whole thing, obviously, it took more time and there was a lot more utilization of a lot of the resources outside of that CPU. But the main thing that took the hit there was 100% volume utilization, which you would expect given all of these file transfers are in the same bracket, the same drive. But what was particularly interesting was that disk utilization. It was creeping to 90 and even 100% at times, because obviously we were utilizing so much of the disk for this operation, which would have led to the whole system lagging completely, given that the entire DSM lives within that hard drive. A little bit on some flash, but predominantly all those apps live on that hard drive as well. But once we moved on to the read and write cache using the EVO, of course, the read and write speeds did improve. We could see straight away there CPU utilization went up somewhere between 45 and 46% average utilization throughout the whole process, and memory utilization went up as well by around 5 to 7%. Now, obviously the volume utilization didn't change, but hard disk utilization went down thanks to the cache offloading a lot of that work on the side using the SSDs, and overall we got a clock time there of 1 hour and 2 minutes. So again, not too shabby. Just over 68 minutes for the whole thing to be completed, from the beginning of the clock and the starting of the read-write process all the way through to the end. And once again, that's 100 gig across 3 different locations, all on the same hard disk. So again, we weren't looking to see if SSD cache would be better than hard drive on its own. We've already established that many times on this channel. But what was of particular interest was when we used the Seagate Ironwolf drives. Now, I haven't lost sight of the fact that these were bigger drives, but within the context of this test, that shouldn't have made an enormous amount of difference. It would have made a pinch difference in some cases, but when we saw that the Seagate in the read-write cache operation achieved a time almost 7 minutes quicker than that of the Samsungs, that is a noticeable difference. I know it doesn't seem like much, but given that we are only utilizing 100 gig in 3 different locations in a non-RAID setting, those 5 to 7 minutes difference will be enormous once you graduate to bigger storage and bigger amounts of data and different file types. One thing I did notice with the Seagate drives is CPU and memory utilization was higher, and I think a lot of that is to do with the triple layered NAND chips that we find in those Seagates, as opposed to the MLC multi-layered NAND chips that we find in the Samsung 860s. I mean, those MLC based NAND chips are much better in terms of the way data is distributed on those chips, and particularly in terms of IOPS, individual inputs and outputs at any given time. And we saw that with the CPU and the memory in the NAS taking a higher hit with those Seagate drives, but there's still no denying that it did the job quicker. The Seagate drives, the Seagate Ironwolf 110 NAS SSDs, performed this operation the quickest of all 3 of these. Now, I'm going to be performing these same tests on a QNAP NAS along with read-write tests and 10GBE tests very shortly, just to show further testing between the Samsung drives and the Seagate. But for now, I'm pleased to confirm that in terms of SSD cache, the Seagate Ironwolf SSDs outperformed the Samsung 860 EVOs in this test. Thank you so much for watching. Do stay tuned for more tests of these drives to find out what's the best SSD for your NAS system, partially or fully. And don't forget to click like and subscribe to be the first in the know when these tests go live. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.